Types of business memos. Hi, I'm Bill Carmody, and I'm here to talk to you about the types of business memos you're going to see inside of organizations. The first is a request. Anytime someone wants to make a request inside of an organization, they'll often use a business memo. The request specifies what specifically are you looking for and by when. So you might be looking for office supplies. So you could have a memo that requests office supplies, or you might be requesting additional budget, or you might be requesting additional team members, or you might be making a request for even a meeting. So there's all types of different ways you would make a request inside of an organization. Each of those would use a request memo. The response memo is in response to a request. So in case you wanted to say, okay, we had a conversation verbally about what the answer was to the request, this is a way to memorialize that answer. So oftentimes there's a lot of people inside of organizations having conversations. When it's important to document the essence of the answer to a conversation, a response memo is used. That way it doesn't become one of those he said, she said type of scenarios, but instead you've actually said, this was the request that was made, and this was the answer that was given on this date, and this is the reason for that particular decision. And the response memo helps to make sure you're documenting decisions being made inside of an organization. And that's helpful, so if there's ever an issue or problem, you can go back and look at what decisions led us to where we are today. A field report. A field report is a type of memo when you leave the company's offices and you go into the field, which could be anything depending on what kind of industry you're in. So let's take, for example, consumer packaged goods companies. They might go into the field and look at a supermarket and say, how is our display? And maybe at an end cap, or let's look at the actual category within all of our competitors. How are our products standing up on the shelves? Does it look good? Does it need to be cleaned up? Are there challenges that we're seeing out there? So a field report would write down everything that was noticed and then be able to turn it in so that others who weren't in the field could learn from that information. Oftentimes, people who are very senior in the organization spend a lot of times in meetings and in the office. They need these field reports to see what's actually happening out in the real world. Sometimes they'll go themselves, but oftentimes they're relying on the people who report into them to tell them, hey, what are you seeing? Especially if think about it in the retail world, there's thousands and thousands of stores. No one in the headquarter office is going to be able to manage all those stores directly, but these field reports help them understand what's going on so they can make really important business decisions. Every industry has its own version of a field report. It's anytime someone's leaving the office to document what they're seeing and noticing, even in conversations, maybe conversations with suppliers, some other people who are affecting the ability for the business to be successful. Meeting minutes is when you have a meeting and you write down what was discussed, what was agreed upon, any action steps, by whom and by when. And so meeting minutes will help make sure that anytime there's a verbal conversation in a meeting, that the person who's taking the notes says, hey, this is what I captured, and they'll send it around and say, does this make sense to everybody? Now, if you're formalizing meeting minutes, then you might actually even vote on those minutes, or you might have everyone approve the minutes before they get published. But the intention there is to memorialize the conversations that are being had and the decisions being made. These memos help to make sure that everything in the organization is documented. So if there's ever a need to go back and look at the decisions that were made, they can see why those decisions were made. Meeting minutes are hugely helpful, especially let's say you're a new team member and you want to quickly get up to speed on all the work that's being done. You want to read through those meeting minutes so that you can feel like you were there and understand what decisions were made. When it comes to status memos, they're really talking about what is the status of a particular project. So for example, you might want to give regular status updates along the project, especially if it's long. If you're talking a project that is either 3, 6, or 9 months, without those status memos, you really don't have a sense whether we're on track, whether they're falling behind, if there are any issues we've run into. If there were, how did you resolve them? Are there resource challenges? Are there contingencies? So if you think about, like, if the person who's running the project wants to let everyone else know how the project's doing, these status memos will continuously check in. Confirmation memos are there to confirm decisions. So anytime a major decision is made, a confirmation memo allows you to memorialize why the decision was made. Not just what we're doing, but what led to the decision. So here are the factors we considered. Here's why we decided to go this way. And again, if you think about it from a place of documentation, you're confirming the decision and everything that led up to making that decision. It helps somebody else who's not on the project, who is not part of a particular department, to read through and understand what decisions were made and why. And lastly is general documentation. Anytime an organization wants to document their decisions or the progress that's being made, these general documentation memos are being used throughout the organization to memorialize decisions and any type of meetings or anything else we've just discussed. It doesn't have to be any of these first 6. A general documentation is really there to make sure that anything that needs to be written down and memorialized so that anyone from the outside looking in can actually determine why decisions were made, who made what decision when, who was responsible for the next step coming out of a particular meeting. All of this documentation is there so that the actual organization can run smoothly. And it's a way to actually bring a lot of verbal conversations into a written form. It also helps when the company is trying to think about, like, what decisions did we make last year that we might want to say that either worked or didn't work, and we might want to decide differently. So it's building the overall intelligence of the organization as you go. So hopefully you understand why these business memos are so important. They are the lifeblood of an organization's information systems. It may seem trivial to the person writing the memo, but most of the stuff you're capturing are helping to actually memorialize all the key decisions being made in an organization. So a well-written memo means that anybody outside the company could come in and read all of the memos that were written by you and understand exactly what decisions were made, what meetings you attended, and it really helps to understand and organize the content associated with whatever you're working on. So it's a great thing to be able to do to help make sure that everyone knows what you're up to.